The Gators get back on the field for everyone to see, not on Saturday. It's a Thursday spring game for the Gators and Billy Napier in Gainesville. We got David Waters on the line from Gators Breakdown to help us set up the spring festivities. David, how's it going?
Pretty good, Mark. Busy week with the spring game. Being on Thursday kind of just throws the schedule all over the place a little bit. So we're trying to wind down spring coverage a bit. This is the only time we get to hear from Billy Napier's staff. This is the only time he lets them talk. He doesn't let them talk during the season. So we've been able to hear from every assistant coach so far and some of the players to go along with it. So been pretty busy covering the Gators this spring, and it all culminates on Thursday night.
Which, David, brings me to why Thursday night? Has there been a reason given to that just being a better time?
Absolutely, Mark. Billy Napier doesn't want to split time with recruits. So all these different spring games going on Saturdays, he was like, well, it may be Thursday, it may be weird. We may not get everybody, but at least, a lot of our top targets, instead of going to Alabama or instead of going to Tallahassee, instead of going to Athens, instead of going to Knoxville, there's only one place to go on Thursday. And so he gets to, he's admitted it's honestly, it's just for recruiting only to have it on a Thursday night. So that's the focus for Billy Napier. It paid off last year. A lot of their commits that ended up in the class of 2023 were at that spring game last Thursday night, or last year's Thursday night spring game. So Billy Napier is going to keep that tradition going, it looks like, for him, and see if it pays dividends again for a class that's off to a really, really good start.
And we'll have the rest of us reworking our schedules, because I got to keep that in mind. Thursday night, Florida football. I can watch it. SEC Network Plus, I believe, right?
Yeah. That's the only bad thing about it being on a Thursday. You don't get pure SEC Network coverage because of baseball coverage. They got those contracts, and part of, I think, the SEC agreement was Thursday nights are going to be SEC baseball. So since it's spring football around baseball season, they got that predetermined agreement there. So, you're streaming it anyway, but it is what it is.
David, I think that's the deal with pretty much across the board in the SEC, unless they're throwing like a Georgia on ESPN2. Auburn was on SEC Network Plus on a Saturday, last Saturday. So I think they prioritize baseball and probably just figure, hey, football fans are football fans, and if they love the SEC, they're going to jump on board. So speaking of which, we'll get through the spring game before we hit some recruiting. Of course, everyone's going to be lasered in on these quarterbacks. And what are we hearing thus far? Anything good, negative? We did hear early returns on Graham Mertz, showing some leadership, picking up the offense, showing to be ready to go.
Yeah, Mark, I think going through as we hit the spring game, it seems to still be a tightly contested battle between Graham Mertz, Jack Miller, Max Brown, probably in that third spot as the young quarterback. He probably will have the bigger plays, just not as consistent as the other two. Kind of seems to be the word right now. So we'll see if Max Brown can get the consistency part down. But right now, the battle does look like it's between Graham Mertz, Jack Miller. I'd say Graham Mertz maybe with a slight lead, Mark, but it really may be eyes of the beholder. I mean, I can talk to people. Look, we only get 10, 15 minutes of practice, and that's warm-ups by that time. You don't really get any 11 on 11 or anything with the media in attendance. But asking around from people who've been to the scrimmages and been at practice, might be eyes of the beholder, Mark. You talk to somebody and say, oh, Graham Mertz looks better. You talk to somebody else and it's Jack Miller looks better. And Mertz seems to be the more consistent that I've heard, maybe looking better. But that lets me know that, he's not really separating right now from Jack Miller. So we'll see how long the battle goes on. I'm not so sure Thursday night will go into some ultimate determination for Billy Napier and naming a starter. I asked him last week if there a timeline to name a starter. He says, not really. We'll cross that bridge when it gets there. So I honestly believe him if he thinks he has the guy who will be the starter. I do think he'll name it. But there's some advantages not. I mean, you play Utah game one. Do you want to keep that under wraps as long as possible as having a starter? But still, Mark, even with that, asking behind the scenes, people who've seen it, that battle will probably still go on into fall camp. So I think the other advantage of naming a starter is once you get into fall camp, you want that guy taking all the starter reps. You want not splitting time between two guys. So I do think ideally Billy Napier would probably want to name a starter maybe right after spring, early in fall camp. So the splits are so the rep splits are going to the number one guy.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown, right here on YouTube, the very best in Florida football coverage. You can catch it on your favorite audio platform, not just the best in Florida football coverage, but one of the very finest and most popular college football podcasts out there. So catch David and the rest of the crew there at Gators Breakdown. And we're gonna guard against overreaction Friday because everybody's gonna overreact to the spring game. And I know people get excited. The cameras are on and they get to see the team play to a certain extent. But let's understand we got 15 practice sessions and typically about these teams go to about 3 scrimmages. And actually the ones that we don't see might be a little bit more important because they're going to do some things that they don't want other people to see. They're not going to do that for the cameras. So let's hold it off on the overreactions. But when we put all 15 practices together, David, and again, you've seen a limited time, but have a number of sources, who do you think's standing out, or is anyone flashed, anyone breaking out this spring?
Yeah, Mark. Well, I guess we'll get some standouts, breakouts, and for right now on offense, I think the running game is a given. Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, even Cam Carroll, throw him in there too. The transfer from Tulane. The running game is about where it should be. We're hearing some big runs still happening for this Gator offense with this running game. Offensive line's been beat up a little bit. So Mark, talking about overreaction, I don't even think Florida's quote unquote starting offensive line will probably even be playing together Thursday night. So it'll probably be something to look out for there. But the run game there. But as far as breakout standouts, I'd say tight end Arlis Boardingham. He was somebody I identified coming into spring as I heard really good early returns as a true freshman last year. He battled some injuries last year. Coming into this spring, been told a couple of times he's been pretty much unguardable at times. So maybe Florida gets the tight end more into the mix. When the season rolls around, Keon Zipperer will be out for the season. That was another tight end for Florida. He's been around the program for a few years now. They're looking to count on him, but he's going to be out with an injury. So Arlis Boardingham actually needs to step up as well at the tight end position for the Gators. And then Mark, on the other side of the ball, I'm going to go up front. Florida brought in some transfers. Noah Banks from Louisville, Cam Jackson from Memphis. Heard those guys have been disruptive, causing havoc all spring long. I do, like you said, probably need to guard against Thursday. We've heard this reputation for Austin Armstrong as a defensive coordinator of being really, really aggressive. Well, in the spring game, how aggressive is Billy Napier going to let him be? I guess is the question. As you said, in the scrimmages, we'll probably get a whole lot more that we don't see. I'm not so sure they want to put out there a lot of what they've been working on tape as live on cameras, as you said, on a Thursday night. So, but we've heard the disruption up front. We've heard the aggressiveness that Austin Armstrong likes to bring. So I'll be looking at those guys to see how they maybe handle one-on-one battles Thursday night. But as far as blitzing and stunts and disguised coverages, I don't know how much we'll get at that Thursday night. The defense as a whole is something that we'll definitely be looking out for this Gators team, as the defense has just not been anywhere near what it should be the last 3 seasons. So disruption up front, and extend that for the defense. Tackling's been an issue for this defense. So, probably the basics on defense a bit. What can you do on one-on-one matchups? Can you make your tackles? Is probably what we'll be looking for. But players, Arlis Boardingham on offense, and those 2 transfers on defense.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown, the best in Florida football coverage. Get there, whether that be on YouTube here or your favorite audio podcast. Turning to recruiting, Conan Daniels, the latest to commit, 6 hard commits right now. Top 35 running back in the country. West Point, Mississippi, a place I'm a little familiar with for my days covering the SEC. They're close in Tupelo. Your thoughts about Conan Daniels and really the recruiting efforts right now? We know late May, early June with all the visits are going to be crucial, but where do we stand right now?
Yeah, for Daniels, Mark, as you mentioned, West Point, Mississippi, that's a powerhouse in Mississippi. From what I've been told the last couple of days, since that Florida's got that commitment. And Mark, the interesting thing about him, he's a 4-star running back on both services there, as you mentioned, 35th running back on 24/7. He plays a lot of quarterback in a run heavy offense there for West Point. And Mark, the stats will just jump off the page at you. Last season, 203 carries, 2,027 yards. 10 yards a carry, 24 touchdowns. So they use him in a multitude of ways, mainly at quarterback, but he's played some running back. He's played some receiver where he'll, slot, he'll motion in and take a handoff or whatever, but very convincing in his running. Once he sticks his foot in the dirt, he's runs with a lot of conviction. He'll outrun some people if you look at his huddle highlights, but I wouldn't necessarily call him a burner, but I would say fast enough for what Billy Napier wants him to do at the running back spot. So we'll see. Mark, he's 358th overall, but as I said, I think the ranking will probably only go up as, first of all, Billy Napier's got a pretty good reputation for recruiting running backs from Louisiana. We saw what Trevor Etienne did as a true freshman last year. And Montrell Johnson, his transfer from Louisville to Florida and being able to succeed in the SEC right away as well. So I think there's a track record. But I do think him being a quarterback now, we'll see if he plays more running back this fall, if he'll camp as a running back to maybe, increase that ranking as once these services get a hold and see what he's able to do. But those stats, I mean, even the year before, 94 carries, 10.9 yards a carry, and 8 touchdowns. So he's got 32 touchdowns in his career. We'll see what he does for his senior year. But, Billy Napier, that's his second running back in this class. Chauncey Bowen's another top 200 player overall. Gives Florida 2 running backs in this class. They'll probably be done at 2 running backs. Jarrett Gibson, the number 1 running back in the country. If he wants him, believe me, they'll take him. Florida's fine with just taking 2 running backs. That's probably the plan unless you get one of the elites to come along with it. Gibson, number 1 running back in the country from the state of Florida. It looks like he's leaning Texas right now. It'd be 2 years in a row Texas comes into the state of Florida and get a top running back. But he was on campus this past weekend. So we'll see ultimately where he lands up. But the plan right now, 2 running backs for the Gators. As you said, Mark, 6 commits right now for a class that's off to a really, really good start. And hopefully, with the spring game, a lot of recruits on campus, a lot of recruits going to the game, Florida looks to be adding even more probably this week as well.
If I'm understanding it, the transfer portal guidelines and the calendar this year, April or May 1st is when everyone will be able to start committing elsewhere and so forth. But I think,
Mark, I think that changed.
April 15th, right?
Yes.
Paperwork can be filed. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I thought maybe paperwork filed on April 15th and they could start to move on May 1st. We'll find out here in just a couple of days. That's for sure. Any particular needs? What would you like to see the pursuits be in the transfer portal?
Napier's he's been pretty forthcoming with that. We'll see. Florida got a big commitment from 2025 quarterback Austin Simmons last week as well from Pahokee. And Mark, unbelievably, there's some talks of him jumping 2 classes and maybe reclassifying for the 23 class. So we'll see. I think that decision has to be made pretty soon. He's already got his high school credits. He's already taken college courses. He's got like a 5.3 GPA. So we'll see if he reclassifies 2 classes, not just 1. So I think that would make it where Florida doesn't have to hit the transfer portal if he reclassifies. If he doesn't reclassify, I still think Florida could go maybe get another arm in the transfer portal, but maybe another receiver, so you don't have to rely on so many young guys that may be taking part in spring. Safety is a position that a lot of youth there. Your starters are 2 true sophomores in Kamari Wilson and Miguel Mitchell, and behind them are true freshmen. I do think if you want to go try and get an experienced safety, you go get that. But talking to Billy Napier last week, he even said edge rusher. He's an edge rusher is a spot that we're really going to be looking at in the transfer portal to see who's available there. And I still say offensive line. Florida did grab 3 offensive linemen from the transfer portal. The last transfer portal cycle, I still think Florida's in the running and could go get 1 or 2 more. As I said, they've been battling injuries this spring for the offensive line, but I think the moves were in the making already to go hit the transfer portal for some more offensive linemen. So I think Florida's going to be pretty busy, Mark, when this new transfer portal window opens up.
Gators Breakdown, folks. That's the place to be for Florida football coverage. First and foremost, David Waters joining us again. It's Thursday night. Remember that, Thursday night for Florida football this week. David, appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks, Mark.